South Carolina's women's basketball team is not good enough to win a game if they have a below C minus performance. But there's one player that's going to help them a ton in March Madness, and that player is MiLaysia Fulwiley.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I'm Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and also the lead publisher for Gamecock Digest over on Fan Nation. Thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team here today. We are free and available both on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcast, Staley. We're going to be all basketball on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. We're going to preview the SEC men's basketball tournament in a way for South Carolina, and I'm going to talk about why their position is definitely a tough one that they're going to have to climb out of. Also, Kim Mulkey is at it again. She had a chance to take back what she said during a radio appearance on Tuesday, and instead she sort of did the exact opposite. We'll dive into that a little bit later on the show. But to start off today's show, we're going to talk about MiLaysia Fulwiley and specifically how much she is going to help South Carolina in the NCAA tournament. Because when we look at this year's team, I think it's fair to say that South Carolina, at least when it comes to the starting lineup, they don't have a dominant scoring threat. And that is why MiLaysia Fulwiley coming off the bench for the Gamecocks could be huge when they are in close games in the NCAA tournament. Now, when we talk about dominant scoring threat, we look at last year's team, obviously. We look at Aaliyah Boston, who was a dominant post player that could always create space for herself through her footwork and also could get a bunch of rebounds because she understood positioning and the rules of positioning for a post player. They also had Zia Cook, who was a volume shooter that could score at all three levels, driving to the basket, shooting a mid-range jumper, and also shooting some three-pointers from time to time as well. And the thing is, the Gamecocks, look, it's not to say that they're not talented. Obviously, I'm not saying that. They're still very talented this season, but they just don't necessarily have that this year. Camila Cardoso, some people might say that she is a dominant post player, and sure, Cardoso has got a great motor for someone that has her length and height, and also that length allows her to get a bunch of offensive rebounds and, get a bunch of second chances and sometimes third chances whenever she does miss a layup. But my point with that is Cardoso can also be very streaky. She has some games where she is just on and pretty much everything she's throwing up is going in. But she also has other games where she's missing a bunch of shots from about 3, 4, 5 feet away from the basket. And as the SEC tournament showed, if South Carolina's offense gets bogged down at any point, there's really one player that can just will them out of a slump in the middle of a game, and that player is MiLaysia Fulwiley. I would describe her as, quite frankly, an equalizer for South Carolina because they're not going to have a cakewalk in the NCAA tournament. Heck, I said they were going to have that in the SEC tournament, and that almost turned to a complete and total disaster. But because of all the skills that Fulwiley possesses, the way that she can attack an opponent on both ends of the floor, she's going to help this team out a ton. So let's break that down. With Fulwiley, it all starts with her speed. Every time MiLaysia Fulwiley is out there on the floor, she is the fastest player on the floor. There's nobody, in my opinion, on any opposing team that can match MiLaysia Fulwiley in terms of sheer speed, being able to go from gear 1 or being idle to gear 4 in a matter of a second or two. There's very few people that can contend with that. And so because of that, it opens the door for Fulwiley to attack you in different ways on offense. And when we talk about her speed, we talk about her ability to make finishing plays around the rim. Because Fulwiley's hand-eye coordination is ridiculous. The way that she is able to manipulate the ball and make it to where she's always got a shot to make a basket, even if she's attacking from an angle that most guards would have trouble scoring on. She's got the ability to do that, and she also has the court vision to see openings where a teammate is, right next to her, and she could dish it off at the very last second. And sometimes she's seeing, things happening a couple seconds ahead where her teammate doesn't even see the ball coming. And obviously, this team will get better at being able to field those passes as they play for a longer period of time alongside MiLaysia Fulwiley. The other thing that Fulwiley did show against LSU specifically in the SEC tournament is she can be a capable three-point shooter. Fulwiley, I believe, right now is shooting about 32% from three-point range. And considering the role that she has on this team and the players that surround her, I would say that's pretty good, because you're not going to ask Fulwiley to shoot from that area of the floor at that high of a clip every single game. You've got Tessa Johnson. You've got Tahina Powpow. You've got Bree Hall. You've got three players right there that are more efficient in terms of their shooting percentage that can also knock down a bunch of threes. But she proved against the Tigers, if you leave her open long enough, she can get hot from that area of the floor really quickly. And so what's going to happen there now is this. Opponents have to respect that. They can't just sag off of her in the NCAA tournament and basically say, we know we can't beat you if you try to drive to the basket, so we're just going to sag off. We're going to just try to let you shoot. They can't do that now that she's put together a game like that. And that's going to open up more things for her. If she adds a pump fake to her game, she's going to have the ability to create more space and give herself another shot from deep. Also, she can use that pump fake to, again, drive to the basket and basically send the whole defense into a scramble drill, drive and kick. That is what basketball is now, offensively speaking. Really, nobody shoots from the mid-range area anymore. It's basically you're shooting a three or you're going right to the rack, and either you're finishing through contact or you're drawing a foul. All of those plays usually net positive results. That's why you see teams and players play that way now. So with Fulwiley's three-point performance against LSU in the tournament in the SEC, that is going to open things up even more offensively for her in the NCAA tournament. And then it's not just her offense. It's not just that makes her an equalizer for this team. It's her aggressive style of play on the defensive end. Now, I have said before that sometimes Fulwiley gets a little bit ahead of herself offensively. Sometimes she gets a bit overzealous, and she's going up against a guard that's both athletic and has decent enough ball handling skills that can get on past her, put her in a bad spot, and then draw a foul. And Fulwiley sometimes can play about 3-4 minutes, and she gets 2 fouls because of something like that. However, as the game against LSU showed, if you don't have a point guard that is both athletic and has good ball handling ability, can handle sort of being the floor general for your team, and Fulwiley is defending her, you're going to be in trouble, because Fulwiley is just like Raven Johnson in the sense that she has unbelievable conditioning, and she is not afraid to just be all over you like a drape in terms of the airspace between herself and her individual matchup. And that hurt LSU in a big way on Sunday afternoon. It's going to hurt anybody who falls into that same situation when they play South Carolina in the NCAA tournament, because imagine you've got Raven Johnson already guarding you 94 feet away from the basket. Then Raven gets a break every so often, but when she comes out, Fulwiley's coming in. And that pressure just ratchets it up even more. Maybe not in terms of the full court press, but especially in terms of the half-court defense. Fulwiley is not going to let you get by her very easily. So there's going to be times in the tournament where South Carolina's going to struggle, especially offensively, and they're going to have to look to somebody to just basically make a couple plays in a row to get them either back in the game or swing the momentum back into their favor. And I think that player is not going to be Camila Cardoso. She's still going to make an impact. Again, I'm not trying to downplay the impact she has for this team, but I think the player that has the best potential to really affect the game by herself is going to be MiLaysia Fulwiley. And I think the NCAA tournament is going to be the first time that we're going to see that consistently from the young freshman out of Columbia, South Carolina. Now, the other day, Kim Mulkey made a radio appearance down there in Baton Rouge, and she was asked about the, I guess, brouhaha that took place on Sunday afternoon in the SEC tournament title game. We all know what she said after the tournament title game. So you would think maybe after getting a bunch of blowback, Mulkey would be, she would be a bit more calculated in terms of what she says and maybe even try to offer up some sort of apology or at least, acknowledge, hey, probably shouldn't have said that. But Mulkey didn't necessarily do that. And it's starting to show that Mulkey, she feels some type of way about Dawn Staley in South Carolina. We'll dive into all of that in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy and also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, and LED headlights, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. And as always, a big thank you to each and every one of you everydayers who make the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your daily choice for South Carolina Gamecock sports coverage. All right, let's talk about Kim Mulkey. Now, with what Kim Mulkey said on ESPN Radio 104.5 FM on Tuesday afternoon, it is becoming quite clear how Kim Mulkey feels about South Carolina Dawn Staley, and also how she goes about delivering a little subtle verbal jab to people that she does not like when she is speaking to the media. So remember, she's the same person that made the comment about Cardoso on Sunday afternoon and said, I wish she would have pushed Angel Reese, which was also an underlying threat. Here's what Kim Mulkey had to say on ESPN Radio 104.5 FM on Tuesday afternoon.
And, Coach, you know how we feel. I loved what went down Sunday in terms of toughness, in terms of taking no crap, in terms of having your teammates back. And I know that you are someone who does not engage with the outside noise. I know, right? Now everybody's saying, "Oh, how could she say that about Cardoso?" And Coach, do you stand by what you said in terms of basically pick on someone your own size?
You guys want me to keep commenting on that little? I don't even know what you call it. I don't call it a fight. I didn't see any.
Thank you. See, that's what I'm talking about.
I
Yes.
didn't see any fist thrown or anything like that.
We've gotten a little soft, Coach, I feel.
I just, I kind of feel like Dawn Staley does, she said it best, things like that happen. She wasn't going to get on her players, so I certainly wasn't getting on my players for anything. It just happened, and you keep playing and you move on. It's an occurrence that happens, guys, in sports. I mean, maybe it's because we're women. It's not
okay. That's actually what I.
Okay, so this is just like Kim Mulkey's answer when she was asked about the whole kerfuffle on Sunday afternoon after the conference title game. Basically, we're starting to figure out Kim Mulkey's style of how she does this. 90 to 95% of her answer, objectively speaking, is pretty reasonable and logical. Not really a whole lot wrong with what she says sort of at the very beginning, in the middle, and then the very tail end. But before she gets to the final part of her answer, she says something like this, quote, She, Dawn Staley, wasn't going to get on her players. So I certainly wasn't getting on my players. This is a subtle insinuation by Kim Mulkey that Dawn has almost cultivated some carefree attitude and culture where, the old saying, boys will be boys. Well, in this case, girls are going to be girls. And she's just going to let her team get away with things. She runs a loose ship to a certain degree. She doesn't say that, but it's pretty easy to read into this and see what she's trying to say. And this is sort of reminiscent of what coaches have said about South Carolina in the past. Think about last year's Final game happened. The media was talking to Iowa head coach Lisa Bluter, and she made the comment about South Carolina's front court when it comes to trying to battle on the boards with them, that it is basically like a bar fight. I'm paraphrasing there, obviously, but it was in essence what she said. And Dawn was obviously not happy about that, because when a coach makes a comment like that, they're basically painting this ugly picture of South Carolina and the way that they play. These coaches are painting South Carolina out to be basically a team of brutes, where it's like they don't have any skill. All they do is just go out there and impose their physical will. It's almost like they're blaming South Carolina for the fact that they are more athletic, let's just be honest, and more talented than like 99, 95% of the teams that they face in women's college basketball or could face on any given day. Like, that is their problem. And the thing that gets me is Mulkey, she had a chance here to just admit, even if she didn't just flat out apologize, she could have just said, look, it was after the game. It was the heat of the moment. I let my emotions get to me a little bit, and I probably should not have said what I said about Cardoso going after Angel Reese and what all that could have sort of implied. That's all she had to say. She didn't have to go beyond that. Heck, and obviously for Kim Mulkey, probably nobody outside of Louisiana would believe she was telling the truth if she said that, but at least she would offer something up, and there'd be a chance that people would, be able to fully move on from all that stuff. And Dawn, since then, obviously, she hasn't said a whole lot besides the fact that obviously she was going to address the entire situation that unfolded with her team, trying to make sure that this group of players does not do something like this ever again. And basically, taking a shot at them on her side of things by saying last year's team would not have done that because we had leaders. And that's not to say this team doesn't have leaders, but it's a younger group. They let their emotions take over maybe a little bit more so than last year's group did, which makes sense because last year's group was full of a bunch of seniors and fifth-year seniors. But Kim Mulkey, she just can't help herself, can't she? She just can't help herself. She's got to make some sort of subtle dig about the way that South Carolina operates, whether it's their play style, how their coach lets them play. And I have to imagine behind closed doors, Don's getting very sick and tired of having to deal with this crap. Because let's just be honest, this is crap. It's crap what's happening here. Gino Auriemma has done a similar thing regarding this in the past. Now, not as a result of a scrum breaking down or happening in a game between South Carolina and UConn, but, basically talking about how physical South Carolina plays. And it's just comical at this point. It's just comical. So the point here is this. Kim Mulkey is not doing her best to try and sort of fan out the flames here. Let's just put it that way. It's kind of like when you are an older sibling and you've got, say, a younger brother, or I guess in this case, a younger sister, and they want to be maybe as good as you are. Maybe you both do the same thing, maybe in terms of playing sports, and you're older and you're considered to be better right now. And the younger sibling wants to be on the same level as you, and they know they're not there yet. So what do? They just annoy you and aggravate the hell out of you. And it gets to a point, at first it's kind of cute, but then after a while, you start to get a bit frustrated with it. And then at a certain point, you just finally go, okay, you know what? That's it. You think you're as good as me, or you want to be as good as me? Let's see what you got. That's exactly what this is. Kim is almost like trying to needle Dawn and South Carolina. Some people called it poking the bear, what they already did this past Sunday. Well, guess what? The leader of their program keeps on doing it. So I tell you what, if they meet up in the NCAA tournament, it is going to be one of the most hyped up matchups we've ever seen in women's college basketball. And it is going to literally take major headlines over other sports. And right now, why wouldn't it? I mean, with all the storylines surrounding it, the sound bites we're getting here like this, it's going to be interesting to see what all happens over the next several weeks. But needless to say, Kim Mulkey, she's not afraid to show her colors when it comes to these comments. Ain't no question about that. Now, talk about the SEC Women's Basketball Tournament this past weekend. Lamont Paris and the men's basketball team are getting ready to go through their SEC tournament. Now, they don't play today, but they will play tomorrow. And I have to admit, I don't really like the spot that the men's basketball team has for their conference tournament. I'll explain why in a couple more moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're a betting man on a big upset or maybe you're looking at a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. South Carolina does have odds out there in terms of reaching the Final Four in the men's bracket. And needless to say, the odds makers don't view them very highly, at least compared to some of the other top seeds. South Carolina's odds right now are currently listed at plus 2,300. That's tied for the 23rd highest odds in the entire group. So you want to put some money down and potentially win big if the Gamecocks go on another Cinderella run this March. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Welcome back to today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your team every single day in just 30 minutes. All right. Today is officially the first day of the SEC men's basketball tournament. Tonight, Vanderbilt will take on Arkansas in the 12 seed versus 13 seed game. And then the other game will be, I believe, the 11 seeded Georgia Bulldogs versus the number 14 seed Missouri Tigers. So basically a little play-in tournament between the worst teams in the conference before the real action begins on Thursday. Now, when looking at South Carolina's position in the tournament bracket, I do not think personally that it is a friendly one. South Carolina, they will play the winner of the Vanderbilt-Arkansas game that takes place later tonight, tomorrow afternoon. And then South Carolina wins that game. They would move on to the quarterfinals where they would have to play the Auburn Tigers, who got one of the double byes, which means basically they're going to be fully rested. I believe at that point, we'll have had 5 or 6 days of rest before playing their first game in the tournament. So a couple reasons why I don't like this position for Lamont Paris and the Gamecocks. One is the play style that this team has. Now, I know that some people might question this point a little bit because the Gamecocks do play quite slow offensively. Obviously, everyone likes to throw out how they are like 353 in terms of pace, according to KenPom. That's like the 10th or 9th slowest team in all of men's college basketball. And sure, that is the case. But South Carolina plays hard on the defensive end. They're all about fundamental defense. They're all about staying in front of you. And obviously, that can expend a lot of energy. And one guy I look at when it comes to how this team plays is BJ Mack. BJ Mack, obviously, the 5 for South Carolina, 6'8", 240. He's a big dude. And obviously, he always has to battle down low with some really good front court players in this league. But also, he's a guy that's used in several ways on offense. You think about this. Sometimes he has his back to the basket and he tries to just back down a front court defender before trying to put the ball up and into the hoop. Other times, he's running out to the three-point line 2-3 times a possession, going on a slip screen, trying to get open, see if his man is going to leave him alone and take a three-point shot. My point here is this. BJ Mack is always moving all over the place, whether he's on offense or defense. So when you look at a guy that can get worn out quite fast with how he plays, it's BJ Mack. And what I don't like here is this. Arkansas, they've got a couple good big men in their front court. I admittedly don't know their names off the top of my head, but they're good athletes and they can make plays happen. Auburn, we all know, they've got Janai Broome and they've got, I believe, Jalen Williams. And those two guys killed South Carolina the first time that they played them. They shot they had their best game from behind the three-point line that they had all season long as a collective unit. I mean, literally, I think they hit like 8 3-pointers. We probably won't see them do that again the entire rest of the season, even if they make it to the tournament and South Carolina does not see them. But you get my point here. The front court play is going to be tough. It is going to be physical. I think it would have been greatly beneficial for South Carolina to get the double bye, but because they got to play in the second round, I do think that's going to hurt them a little bit in that regard. And on that same note, Auburn is going to be rested, right? When you play a guy like Janai Broome and Jalen Williams, sometimes you need to have some other factors that go your way. And for South Carolina, one of those factors definitely would have been having them play one game before you, and then you getting to rest an extra day before you got to deal with them. But that's not going to happen. And then here is the last thing I want to say about all this. Going beyond Auburn, let's say South Carolina takes care of business against Arkansas or Vanderbilt, because right now everyone's all of a sudden like all on the must bus again with Arkansas, and they're picking them to be some sort of Cinderella player in this conference tournament. I don't know how much I buy that necessarily, but sure. I mean, you got to respect them. They still got a lot of talent, but let's just say South Carolina wins the second round matchup, whoever they play. Then let's say they do beat Auburn in the quarterfinals. If they make it to the semifinals, there's a chance that they have to play maybe Tennessee, who has great defense in the half court, is willing to be physical, and is, again, a little bit more rested than you are. This would be your third game in 3 days. It'd only be their second game in 2 days. Or you could play Mississippi State. And sure, compared to Tennessee, they don't have the three-point shooting that they do as a collective unit. But Mississippi State's got some big boys in their front court. Obviously, that starts with Tolu Smith. And then you look at a guy like Cameron Matthews. And then they got guys behind them that just take up a bunch of space and they make you work. So because of the fact South Carolina has to play in the second round, and then you look at the teams that are on their side of the bracket, Mississippi State is going to play South Carolina tough no matter what if that matchup happens. Tennessee, duh. We all know that would be a tough game. And then Auburn. Auburn beat Carolina by 40 at home earlier this year. Not saying that that's going to happen again, but obviously you got to imagine that's going to be on South Carolina's minds going into that game. Like, man, we got smoked by these guys last time we played them. Are we going to be able to contend with them? They might be the one team where they have some doubt of whether or not they could win a game against them in the SEC tournament. And that is their potential matchup if they get out of the second round against Vanderbilt or Arkansas. So I just don't like the combination of factors here. I'm not going to sit here and say Carolina can't go on a run, because I think Carolina has proven for the most part that they can play with almost anybody in this conference and in college basketball. You know, people are overlooking the fact that they beat Tennessee and held Tennessee's offense to their 2 lowest scoring outputs in conference play throughout the entire regular season. You should not overlook that. Beat Mississippi State twice. Had no business losing to LSU at home. Everyone knows that. The Tigers are sure an improved team, but no question the Gamecocks are the better team compared to LSU. You would have loved to have had any of those 3 teams be that quarterfinal matchup potentially, but instead you got Auburn. So we'll see how Lamont Paris and the Gamecocks perform down there. Obviously, I'll be sure to break down whoever they play in the second round a little bit more on our Thursday show, whether it is Vanderbilt or Arkansas. But we'll have to wait to see what happens later tonight. I believe that game takes place starting at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, and that would be 6 o'clock Central time if you are over in Nashville watching these teams play. So with that being said, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show as always. What are y'all's thoughts on MiLaysia Fulwiley and her impact? Do you think she could be the biggest difference for South Carolina's women's basketball team in the NCAA tournament? What are your thoughts on Kim Mulkey and what she had to say on that radio appearance on Tuesday afternoon? And lastly, what are your opinions on South Carolina's men's basketball team and where they're situated in the tournament bracket on their side that will begin again later tonight? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section if you watch today's show on YouTube, or you you can shoot me a direct message on X at @ALion_SC if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app. As always, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.